Chamber and solo instrumental works. Mendelssohn produced chamber music throughout his career, beginning with piano quartets composed in his early adolescence. His Piano Quartet No. 1 in C minor, Op. 1, dates to October 18, 1822, followed by No. 2 in F minor, Op. 2, completed December 3, 1823, and No. 3 in B minor, Op. 3, finished in 1825. These works demonstrate precocious mastery of form and counterpoint, influenced by classical models like Mozart. A pivotal achievement came with the String Octet in E-flat major, Op. 20, composed in 1825 at age 16 as a birthday gift for his sister Fanny. Its scherzo anticipates the lightness of his later fairy music. Mendelssohn's string quartets include early efforts like No. 1 in E-flat major, 1823, unpublished, and mature sets, Op. 12 in A minor, 1829, Op. 13 in A minor, 1827, premiered 1827, and the Op. 44 triptych, D major, 1838, E minor, 1837, and E-flat major, 1838, dedicated to Swedish royalty. String quintets followed, No. 1 in A major, Op. 18, 1826, and No. 2 in B-flat major, Op. 87, 1842. Piano trios represent late chamber highlights, with Op. 49 in D minor, 1839, and Op. 66 in C minor, 1845, the latter incorporating a fugue inspired by Bach. Sonata form works for pairs include two cello sonatas, B-flat major, Op. 45, 1838, and D major, Op. 58, 1843, and violin sonatas, such as the posthumously published F minor, 1838, alongside earlier unpublished efforts from 1820 and 1824. In solo instrumental repertoire, Mendelssohn's piano output dominates, featuring the Lieder one word, Songs Without Words, a cycle of 48 short, lyrical pieces across 8 books, OPP 19b, 67b, composed between 1829 and 1845 and published progressively from 1830 onward. These evoke vocal expressiveness without text, blending song-like melodies with idiomatic piano textures. The first, in E major, originated as a 1828 birthday gift to Fanny. Additional solo piano works encompass variations, e.g., Op. 82, 1841, Preludes and Fugues, Op. 35, 1837, and Etudes, Op. 104b, posthumous. For other solo instruments, he wrote organ sonatas, OPP 65 and 72, 1844 to 1845, though these blend solo and liturgical elements. Vocal, choral, and operatic output. Mendelssohn produced a significant corpus of Lieder for solo voice and piano, totaling over 150 songs, many published in sets during the 1820s and 1830s. These works, often setting German Romantic texts by poets such as Goethe, Heine, and Morica, emphasize lyrical melody, subtle piano accompaniment, and emotional restraint reflective of his classical training. Notable examples include the 12 Gesang, Op. 8, composed 1824 to 1827, which feature early mature settings like Frühlingslied, and the 6 Gesang, Op. 34, 1832 to 1835, containing the enduringly popular Auf Flügeln des Gesanges, On Wings of Song, praised for its soaring vocal line and harp-like piano figuration. His choral output, excluding oratorios, comprises sacred motets, psalm settings, and secular part songs for mixed or male voices, often with organ or piano accompaniment. Sacred works include the 3 motets, Op. 69, 1847, featuring Herr Gott, Abrahams, a double choir piece drawing on Renaissance polyphony, and the 3 motets, Op. 78, 1840s, such as Richter du, O Gott, composed for unaccompanied chorus. Secular choral pieces, like the 4-part songs in Op. 76, 1840s, reflect convivial or folk-inspired themes, while the Festgesang, Op. 80, 1840, written for male chorus and brass to commemorate the Gutenberg Bible's anniversary, incorporates Lutheran chorales. The Lobgesang, Op. 52, 1840, a hybrid symphony cantata premiered in Leipzig, blends orchestral movements with choral odes praising divine light, totaling 9 sections for soloists, chorus, and orchestra. Mendelssohn's oratorios represent the pinnacle of his choral writing, reviving the Handelian tradition with dramatic narratives, vivid orchestration, and accessible counterpoint suited to 19th-century festivals. Paulus, St. Paul, Op. 36, completed in April 1836 and premiered on May 22, 1836, at the Lower Rhenish Music Festival in Dusseldorf, recounts the Apostles' conversion and ministry in two parts for soloists, chorus, and orchestra, incorporating chorales like Sleepers, Awake for narrative emphasis. Elijah, Op. 70, composed primarily in 1846 and premiered on August 26, 1846, in Birmingham Town Hall with nearly 400 performers under Mendelssohn's direction, dramatizes the prophet's life from 1 Kings, featuring thunderous choruses such as Yet doth the Lord see it not and the quartet Cast thy burden upon the Lord, achieving immediate international acclaim for its prophetic intensity and biblical fidelity. An unfinished third oratorio, Christus, Op. 97, begun 1847, survives in two parts setting passion texts with recitatives and chorales. Operatic efforts were limited and less successful, yielding three works amid Mendelssohn's preference for concert and choral forms over stage drama. Die Hochzeit des Camacho, Camacho's Wedding, Op. 10, a one-act comic opera composed in 1825 and premiered on April 6, 1827, in Berlin, adapts a Don Quixote episode with ensembles and arias but was withdrawn after two performances due to perceived weaknesses in libretto and orchestration. Die Heimkehr aus der Fremde, Son and Stranger, Op. 89, a one-act singspiel completed December 19, 1829, and privately premiered on December 26, 1829, in Berlin for a small audience, employs spoken dialogue and folk-like songs on a mistaken identity plot, gaining modest popularity through its overture. Die Lorelei, Op. 98, an unfinished grand opera from 1847 left at 3 acts after Mendelssohn's death, reworks a Rhine legend with Wagnerian ambitions but was completed and staged posthumously in 1860. These operas, while demonstrating melodic gifts, highlight Mendelssohn's challenges with theatrical pacing and librettos, contributing to his sparse output in the genre. Performance, conducting, and revival efforts. As pianist and organist, Mendelssohn began formal piano studies in 1815 under Ludwig Berger in Berlin and made his recital debut 3 years later, at the age of 9. As a pianist, he was celebrated for his clarity, elegance, and technical precision, often performing his own concertos, including the premiere of his Piano Concerto No. 1 in G minor, Op. 25, on October 17, 1831, in Munich, where he served as soloist. In 1830, during a visit to Weimar, he performed piano works for Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, impressing the poet with interpretations that blended classical poise and romantic expressiveness. Mendelssohn's piano playing emphasized structural fidelity and interpretive restraint, drawing comparisons to Mozart among contemporaries for its prodigious early mastery and avoidance of excessive virtuosic display. He frequently accompanied chamber ensembles and conducted from the keyboard, as in early performances of his string symphonies composed by age 14. While not pursuing piano as a primary professional outlet in adulthood, favoring conducting and composition, his technique remained formidable, supporting extemporaneous and sight-reading prowess evident in private and semi-public settings. As an organist, Mendelssohn demonstrated exceptional skill from age 11, following his first documented encounter with the instrument in 1820, and continued performing until his death. He composed significant organ works, including the 6 sonatas, Op. 65, 1845, which he performed complete at St. Catherine's Church in Frankfurt that year. His style featured innovative pedal independence, crisp staccato articulation, and seamless integration of Baroque counterpoint with romantic improvisation, influencing English organists through advanced techniques like those in his Sonata No. 5. Mendelssohn's organ performances gained prominence during his 10 visits to England, where he extemporized on large instruments and promoted Bach's works. On September 10, 1837, at St. Paul's Cathedral in London, he improvised despite interruptions from vergers halting the bellows. 2 days later, at Christ Church, Newgate, he executed a pedal fugue with fire and energy, earning praise from Henry John Gauntlet as exquisitely beautiful. In 1840, he gave a Bach recital at St. Thomas Church in Leipzig to fund a memorial, and on July 9, 1842, improvised for Queen Victoria and Prince Albert at Buckingham Palace, incorporating the theme Rule Britannia. Contemporaries like Charles Edward Horsley lauded his creative and executive abilities, while Samuel Wesley offered unmeasured approbation. His playing advanced the organ's role in serious concert repertoires, aiding the Bach Revival. Orchestral and choral conducting. Mendelssohn assumed his first major professional conducting post as music director in Düsseldorf in 1833, a role he held until 1835, overseeing the municipal theatre's orchestra and opera productions alongside choral orchestral events at the Lower Rhine Music Festival. In this position, he conducted works by Beethoven and Mozart, grappling with inadequate rehearsal time and ensemble discipline that led to public mishaps, such as near abandonment of a Don Giovanni performance amid audience disruptions. Despite these obstacles, his efforts elevated local standards, including 7 conducting appearances at the Lower Rhine Festival between 1833 and 1846, where he directed large-scale choral orchestral repertoires like Handel's oratorios and Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. In 1835, at age 26, Mendelssohn was appointed conductor of the Leipzig Gewandhaus Orchestra, serving until his death in 1847 and transforming it into a model of precision and interpretive depth through exhaustive rehearsals, often up to 6 per concert program. He expanded the repertoire to include rarely performed symphonies by Schubert and Schumann, premiering the latter's first, second, and fourth symphonies, while enforcing balanced programming that prioritized classical masters like Mozart and Beethoven. Mendelssohn's approach emphasized rhythmic vitality and ensemble cohesion, pioneering the consistent use of a slender baton, introduced around 1829, for clearer gesture visibility, which supplanted earlier methods like violin bowing or hand signals and influenced subsequent European conducting practices. His 20 annual subscription concerts drew international acclaim, fostering fundraising benefits and attracting virtuosi, as noted by contemporaries like Robert Schumann, who praised the orchestra's perfection in the new Zeitschrift für Musik. Mendelssohn's choral conducting paralleled his orchestral work, particularly in Leipzig, where he directed integrated performances of oratorios and masses with the Gewandhaus forces, blending choir and orchestra for unified expression. At the Lower Rhine Festival, his interpretation stressed textual clarity and dramatic pacing in works like his own St. Paul, premiered 1836, setting benchmarks for festival conducting amid growing amateur choral societies. From 1841, he intermittently held the Prussian court title of General Music Director in Berlin, conducting the Royal Chapel Orchestra and Opera, though administrative conflicts and overwork limited its impact compared to Leipzig. Overall, Mendelssohn's tenure in these roles professionalized conducting by prioritizing preparation and artistic intent over improvisation, laying groundwork for the virtuoso conductor archetype. Key revivals, especially Bach. Mendelssohn's most significant contribution to musical revival was his orchestration of the premiere of Johann Sebastian Bach's Street Matthew Passion, BWV 244, on March 11, 1829, at the Singakademie zu Berlin, marking the first performance of the work since approximately 100 years prior to Bach's death in 1750. At age 20, Mendelssohn, who had encountered the score at 15 and immersed himself in Bach's style, prepared a performing edition from surviving parts, including cuts and adaptations to suit contemporary tastes and ensemble capabilities, such as dividing the double choir among available singers. He conducted 2 additional performances that year, drawing large audiences that overflowed the venue and ignited widespread interest in Bach's contrapuntal mastery, previously dismissed as overly complex or antiquated. This event catalyzed the 19th-century Bach Revival, positioning Mendelssohn as its primary architect by demonstrating the viability of Bach's music in public concert settings and inspiring subsequent editions and performances across Europe. Mendelssohn continued advocating for Bach through performances of works like the St. John Passion, premiered under his direction in 1833, and motets, while in Leipzig as director of the Gewandhaus Orchestra from 1835, he programmed Bach regularly, including the Magnificat in D major, BWV 243, in 1837. His 1840 all-Bach organ recital at Thomaskirche further exemplified this commitment, featuring preludes and fugues that highlighted Bach's instrumental depth. Beyond Bach, Mendelssohn revived interest in other Baroque composers, notably George Friedrich Handel, by editing and conducting full versions of oratorios like Israel in Egypt in 1833 and Jephthah in 1840's performances, but his Bach efforts uniquely bridged scholarly rediscovery with popular acclaim, influencing figures like Robert Schumann and establishing contrapuntal rigor as a Romantic-era ideal. These initiatives, grounded in Mendelssohn's early advocacy within Berlin's intellectual circles, countered the post-classical preference for melodic simplicity and laid foundations for the complete Bach editions of the late 1850s. Editorial and educational contributions. Editing historical scores. Mendelssohn commenced his editorial work on historical scores in his youth, focusing primarily on the music of George Friedrich Handel. In 1828, at the age of 19, he was commissioned by Carl Friedrich Zelter to prepare a rescored version of Handel's Assis and Galatea, HWV 49, for performance by the Berlin Singakademie, expanding the original chamber orchestration to suit larger choral and instrumental forces while preserving the pastoral essence. This effort, completed by 1829, marked his initial foray into adapting Baroque works for contemporary audiences, introducing fuller textures and dynamic contrasts that aligned with early Romantic performance practices. He similarly edited Handel's Dettingen Te Deum, HWV 278, around the same period for the Singakademie, demonstrating a methodical approach to sourcing manuscripts and refining scores for revival. Mendelssohn's most influential editorial contribution centered on Johann Sebastian Bach, whose works he championed through meticulous preparations for performance and publication. In 1829, he edited Bach's Street Matthew Passion, BWV 244, for its Berlin premiere on March 11, incorporating additions such as wind instruments, reinforced choral parts, and cues to enhance clarity and emotional impact, which drew from available manuscripts and CPE Bach's copies. This edition, performed with a double chorus and orchestra of approximately 400 participants, not only facilitated the work's modern rediscovery but also set a precedent for historically informed yet practically adapted presentations of polyphonic vocal music. Mendelssohn revisited the score for subsequent performances, including in Leipzig in 1841, refining dynamics and tempi based on empirical rehearsal outcomes to balance fidelity with accessibility. Extending his Bach scholarship, Mendelssohn collaborated on publishing editions of Bach's organ compositions, culminating in a London edition of selected preludes and fugues issued by Coventry and Hollier between 1845 and 1846. These efforts involved critical examination of original sources, correction of scribal errors, and provision of fingerings and registration suited to 19th-century organs, thereby renewing interest in Bach's keyboard repertoire amid a decline in organ performance traditions. His editions emphasized textual accuracy derived from primary autographs and early copies, influencing subsequent scholarly publications while prioritizing practical utility for performers. Mendelssohn's broader antiquarian pursuits included research into Renaissance and 17th-century polyphony, though his published outputs remained concentrated on Handel and Bach, reflecting a commitment to reviving underappreciated masterpieces through rigorous, source-based editing. Teaching and mentorship. In 1843, Mendelssohn co-founded the Conservatorium der Musik in Leipzig, Germany's inaugural music conservatory, and assumed the role of Director of Studies, overseeing its curriculum and instruction until his death in 1847. The institution emphasized systematic training in harmony, counterpoint, and performance, reflecting Mendelssohn's commitment to classical forms over emerging Romantic excesses, with an initial enrollment of around 29 students drawn from Europe. As an instructor, Mendelssohn delivered classes in advanced composition and ensemble playing, prioritizing technical precision and ensemble discipline amid his concurrent duties as Gewandhaus conductor. His approach fostered a conservative pedagogical framework, influencing subsequent generations through emphasis on score study and collective rehearsal, though his direct teaching load remained limited by administrative and performing commitments. Mendelssohn extended mentorship beyond formal classes to promising talents, notably guiding the violinist Joseph Joachim, then aged 12, upon his arrival at the conservatory in 1843. Under Mendelssohn's supervision, Joachim debuted publicly in Leipzig that year and premiered Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto in 1845. This relationship exemplified Mendelssohn's selective nurturing of exceptional abilities, often through performance opportunities and personal encouragement rather than extensive private tuition. He similarly advised British composer William Sterndale Bennett during visits and correspondence, promoting disciplined craftsmanship in orchestral writing. Reception, controversies, and legacy. Initial acclaim and posthumous decline. Mendelssohn garnered widespread acclaim across Europe during his lifetime, establishing himself as a virtuoso conductor, pianist, and composer from an early age. Appointed music director of the Leipzig Gewandhaus Orchestra in 1835 at age 26, he transformed it into one of Europe's premier ensembles through rigorous rehearsals and innovative programming that balanced classical masters like Beethoven and Mozart with contemporary works, earning immediate idolization from audiences and critics for his precision and passion. His 1829 revival of Bach's Street Matthew Passion in Berlin marked a pivotal moment, reintroducing the work to modern audiences and solidifying his reputation as a scholarly innovator. In England, where he toured multiple times, his 1829 London debut featured the English premiere of the A Midsummer Night's Dream Overture, sparking public enthusiasm, and by 1847 he was hailed as one of the greatest musicians the world ever produced. The pinnacle of his lifetime success came with the premiere of his oratorio Elijah on August 26, 1846, at Birmingham Town Hall, where Mendelssohn conducted an orchestra of 125 and a chorus of over 270 before an audience of 2,000. The performance elicited repeated encores and ovations, with reviewers describing it as a sensation that confirmed his mastery of dramatic choral writing. This triumph, alongside successes like his violin concerto and symphonies, positioned him as a dominant figure in Romantic music, blending classical clarity with emotional expressiveness in a manner that resonated broadly without the revolutionary upheavals favored by emerging radicals. Following Mendelssohn's death on November 4, 1847, at age 38, his music retained strong popularity in England, where a Mendelssohn cult persisted into the 1850s, fueled by repeated performances of favorites like Elijah. In Germany, however, his reputation began to erode amid pre-existing criticisms from the 1840s, such as Heinrich Heine's and Franz Brendel's charges of over-intellectualization and insufficient modernity, and accelerated post-mortem. Richard Wagner's 1850 essay Judaism in Music, initially published anonymously in 1849, targeted Mendelssohn explicitly, decrying his works as superficially polished yet lacking profound, heart and soul-searching effect, attributing this to an inherent Jewish coldness despite Mendelssohn's assimilated Christian background and Protestant-themed compositions like Paulus. While Wagner's anti-Semitic polemic amplified a shift toward valuing raw emotional depth and nationalistic innovation over Mendelssohn's refined formalism, echoed in predictions like Eduard Kruger's 1850 forecast that his church music would fade within a generation, the decline reflected broader aesthetic realignments rather than Wagner alone, as German critics increasingly favored the new German school of programmatic, leitmotif-driven music. Wagner's critique and aesthetic debates. In 1850, Richard Wagner published the essay Das Judentum in der Musik, Judaism in Music, initially under a pseudonym, in which he critiqued the influence of Jewish composers on German art music, explicitly targeting Felix Mendelssohn alongside Giacomo Meyerbeer. Wagner acknowledged Mendelssohn's technical proficiency and elegance, describing his works as beautiful to listen to, but contended that they lacked profound emotional depth and true originality due to an inherent Lalian quality rooted in Jewish heritage, which he argued prevented genuine assimilation into Germanic musical expression. This assessment persisted despite Mendelssohn's Lutheran baptism in 1816 and his family's conversion from Judaism 3 years earlier, as Wagner emphasized ethnic rather than religious identity, claiming Mendelssohn's command of European musical forms was superficial, akin to acquired rather than innate mastery. Wagner's aesthetic objections framed Mendelssohn's style as overly formalistic and polished, exemplified in pieces like the Italian Symphony, Op. 90, premiered 1833, or Songs Without Words, prioritizing clarity and classical restraint over the revolutionary passion and mythic integration he advocated in his own operas, such as Der Ring des Nibelungen. He portrayed Mendelssohn's music as emblematic of a bourgeois, intellectually driven approach that mimicked Beethoven's profundity without achieving its folk-derived vitality, contrasting it with what Wagner saw as authentic German Romanticism grounded in national spirit and emotional immediacy. This critique extended to Mendelssohn's revival of Johann Sebastian Bach's works, which Wagner dismissed as scholarly rather than transformative, failing to infuse them with the living dramatic force he pursued. The essay ignited enduring aesthetic debates in 19th-century music criticism, pitting Mendelssohn's neoclassical synthesis, blending Bachian counterpoint with Mozartian grace, against Wagner's vision of Gesamtkunstwerk, total artwork, which demanded synthesis of music, drama, and visuals to transcend mere entertainment. Proponents of Wagner, including figures like Eduard Hanslick's critics, amplified the attack to elevate revolutionary opera over Mendelssohn's symphonic and choral output, influencing a shift in tastes toward program music and leitmotifs, though Mendelssohn's defenders, such as Robert Schumann, countered by praising his work's structural integrity and melodic purity as evidence of universal genius unbound by ethnic determinism. These exchanges highlighted tensions between formalism and expressivism, nationalism and cosmopolitanism, with Wagner's anti-Semitic framing later echoed in cultural policies excluding Jewish artists, undermining claims of purely artistic merit, as empirical assessments of Mendelssohn's enduring performances, e.g., over 1,000 editions of his scores printed by 1900, suggest his music's accessibility and craftsmanship sustained popularity independent of such polemics.